The Irrational Confidence Podcast. Take me home, country roads. That John Denver, he's a smart man. He's wonderful. One of our favorite places in all of college football to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to the wonderful, the absolutely fantastic, but you can't burn couches there. So remember that it is a felony. We're going to Morgantown, West Virginia. The Iowa State Cyclones. Ooh, not Hawkeyes. Iowa State Cyclones.
Get in trouble.
I would get in trouble for that. I corrected myself quick enough. They're 5-0. They're 5-0 right now. They're second in the Big 12, tied with BYU. Interesting thing with the Cyclones here, Fresh. But then you take a look at West Virginia. They're 3-2 on the year. They start off with that really rough loss versus Penn State. They lose on the road to Pittsburgh in an absolute classic of a game. We knew that there's talent on this Mountaineers team. We thought that they may be a little bit better, that a lot of breaks would have to go their way, but they could be a dark horse playoff contender. Iowa State is starting to creep into that weird area that Matt Campbell struggles with here, Fresh. When there's no expectations on Iowa State, things go really, really well for them. The minute you start stacking those expectations and they start getting the press clippings, like you like to say, Iowa State has a tendency to, lay a dud here. So at the time of record, Iowa State, and I don't like this piece either, Iowa State is a 3-point road favorite in Morgantown. Over under is 52.5. Fresh, what do you got with Iowa State, West Virginia?
Well, right off the bat, does Iowa State have enough offense to compete in a track meet?
Right.
Beckett quarterback has been, I would say, a poor man's or a young Brock Purdy. He doesn't have the swagger late in games that Brock Purdy had because we had Brocktober, but he's able to efficiently operate Matt Campbell's offense within the system. Jalen Noel, good, very solid receiver, good playmaker at that position. And then a triumvirate of running backs, Jalen Johnson, Abu Samad II, and Carson Hansen have all been pretty successful in the ground game. They're all going to have to play an elite effort. On top of that, the offensive line is going to have to show up and make big plays for this team to function at a high level. Coming into this ball game, the Cyclones have scored 21 or less points in 3 of their 5 games. That is not going to get the job done. You're not beating West Virginia 20-13 or 17-10. You have got to show up and score at least 27 points with the defense they have, at least 27 in this ball game to be in that ballpark to win. So this offense is going to have to be effective, deal with the crowd noise. It's a night game. It's not a noon kickoff in Morgantown. It is a night kickoff, 8 o'clock Eastern time on Fox. It's going to be loud. It's going to be intense. You've got to have to manage your expectations. This is not even going to Iowa City and playing the Hawkeyes at 3:30 in September. This is a different environment. How are you focused, ready to go, being undefeated, having the pressure where West Virginia has nothing to lose? On the other side, Iowa State's defense is absolutely amazing. Iowa State's defense has allowed 21 or less points in every game. So if they can get into 22, they're probably winning. You got to trust your defense is probably going to give up 24 or less, maybe 27. And against West Virginia, the offense is pretty solid. This is probably going to be the best offense they're going to face all year, at least up to this point. So if you can gauge the Iowa State defense to give 27 or less, means you just have to get 4 drives, 4 touchdowns, 28-27. That has got to be your focus, Matt Campbell. That has got to be your focus for the offense. We need 4 solid drives, and we've got to finish with touchdowns. If you start getting in a field goal kicking contest with West Virginia, eventually they're going to stumble into a touchdown or not. Your defense is not, for lack of a better term, last year's Michigan, the 2021 Dogs, the 85 Bears for that matter. It's not that lights out where you're shutting people down. You're still going to have some holes. You're going to have to score some points in this ballgame. Both being undefeated in the league, and like I said, there's no East-West anymore, so it's pretty wide open. The Big 12 has always been straightforward the past few years, but you've got to just keep churning through and getting W's. Whatever your non-conference record really, doesn't really have much bearing going forward. You just need to focus on the task at hand. If the winner of this ball game is going to really put themselves in a solid driver's seat at 3-0 with 6 games to go, having yourself a tiebreaker over, a significant team in the race, and really stacks up nicely going forward. West Virginia has scored 32 or more points in every game except for the opener versus Penn State. This offense has found their footing after that stumbling affair during the opening weekend. They have had a tough loss to Pitt. I think that's bad, make them battle tested. They should have won that game, but they had some late lapse on defense late in the ball game. They have wins over Kansas, wins over Oklahoma State, which on paper coming into the year, we were like, man, those are great wins. Oklahoma State's been a dud and Kansas is 1-5. So are those really great wins? Or are they just beating teams that were dysfunctional, injury prone, beat up, not mentally right there and focused? I'm going to say somewhere in between where there's talent, but they just got, maybe the will was taken from them early in the ballgame. They weren't able to finish the drill. So we're going to find out about West Virginia if they're truly, if that opener for Penn State was in a complete aberration and they just have been struggling to find their groove, and they just beaten bad teams and they're just lucky enough to move to be where they are, be 2-1 in the league. Garrett Green, the more experienced quarterback, Jaheim White, running back, 2 solid players, solid offensive line for the Mountaineers. They've all, like we mentioned earlier with Iowa State, you've got to score points. Iowa State's defense is great. It means the offensive line's got to execute. They've got to block, get to their gaps, seal off, and let the running backs let Garrett Green be magic and do their thing. Sustain drives, limit the turnovers, use the crowd as your extra person. We always talk about 12th man, crowd voice, all, but this case it's going to help. If you can keep yourself in the football game, that crowd's going to stay alive. And late in the fourth quarter, if it's even a close ball game, that defense might have issues, or your defense will get the benefit of that extra crowd noise boosting up and bringing it toward their offense. So keep yourself in the ball game. Don't act like the Penn State game. The Penn State game, you showed up weak, you showed up timid, you showed up scared, and you let the Penn State offense just run the ball and throw the ball right down your throat. We had questions about the Penn State passing attack. They looked like it was practice in opening week. I think West Virginia played too tight. This game, you've got to play loose. You have nothing to lose. You're playing an undefeated team at home. Do not be scared. Be aggressive. Play, focused football. Play disciplined football, but attack all night. If you attack, you're going to beat Iowa State. I know we have a soft spot for West Virginia. I know I also really, really respect Matt Campbell, so this is a very tough
game
to have in this game. I just think Iowa State's played so fine-tuned perfect, and I mentioned it with the points allowed and points scored per game, that they're bound for a clunker on one of those sides, where they have a no-show on offense or the defense just doesn't travel. Should they have lost to Iowa? I still think they should have lost to Iowa. That second half comeback was a miracle. They've played with fire. I think that comes to an end here. I think West Virginia pulls off the upset. I'm going to say 30-24 final. Mountaineers take the dub, keep themselves in the Big 12 race, and really, I think any of that talk about Neil Brown going back to the hot seat after the rough start was in the big loss for Penn State.
Come on.
He completes, puts that away. He's recycled, got himself firmly locked in as the head coach there in West Virginia. And they're able to move forward, to next Saturday and keep themselves alive. So, let's go Mountaineers. Let's go drink some beers.
Yeah, Fresh. Here's the interesting thing that I was looking at with this game. Iowa State's defense, you're spot on with saying that they're a really, really strong defense, but it's a lopsided strong defense. They have a phenomenal defensive backfield right there and a nice pass rush here that is really preventing teams from throwing the football on them. The problem is that West Virginia is not going to throw the football a ton on you. They're going to do it enough to keep you balanced. We're not talking about like an Army, Navy, Air Force type of attack where you throw the ball less than 10, 15 times a game. But we are talking that West Virginia is going to run the football between White, Donaldson, and Green there. Iowa State is letting up 138 yards per game on the ground. That's one of the areas. If Iowa State gives up that many rushing yards in this football game, it's going to be a celebration in Morgantown. These running backs and quarterback are going to run all over that Iowa State defense there. Iowa State again. I like Matt Campbell a lot, and that's where I have such a hard time with this piece because he is a really, really solid football coach. he has built Iowa State into a consistent winner and a program that if I'm an Iowa State alumni, I'm damn proud of what that man's doing over there. I'm excited to wear my Cyclone gear and all of that stuff. And I kind of feel the same way about Neil Brown. Like, he had a rough start of it. You came from Troy, you had a rough start. People thought you were going to be one of the first coaches fired. And what did you do? You pulled yourself off the mat. You're no longer on the hot seat. And I think I'm with you on this, Fresh. I think West Virginia is going to win this game. I think that they're going to be able to run the football at Iowa State. Again, these first two games, I have this weird gut feeling that the team that is the underdog, I think we're going to see some early upsets in these football games. They're going to come away with these wins, and people are going to go, why did they win? And it's kind of a gut feeling on that. Iowa State should win this football game. They should. They're better. They're probably the better team. But I think the one thing that they could improve upon through the remainder of the season is something that West Virginia does well. So I think West Virginia's win this game. I'm going to go a 31-24 game. I'm going to go a touchdown game there. Iowa State's going to be really a tough team on them, but I just think that they're going to score just enough off of them. I think they're going to blow past that point marker that you said at. And you're going to have a bunch of West Virginia fans, at 2 a.m, being face down or screaming and still celebrating in their apartment complex in the grass, just having a really good time running around. I think this would be an amazing game to be at. If this was a game where it wasn't like a loaded weekend and you didn't have Red River or anything, I think this would be a really, really fun game that we would attend if that was possible.
I mean, the Big 12 is going to always be chaos. I think that's the fun part about it, that's where I think it's going to be very tough for them to get two teams in the playoff because they're going to beat each other up. You don't have three elite teams who are just going to head and shoulders better than everybody else. The parity across the board is so strong that like BYU, Iowa State, they're going to get one or two losses along the way, and they're going to have games that are clunkers because they're playing great teams across the board. The BYU smoking Kansas State, and kind of like, oh my God, that just happened. And now we all love BYU. BYU could be the next team, or Iowa State could be this team this week, or it just cycles. We all thought Arizona was going to be great this year. We thought Oklahoma State was going to be great. We thought Kansas was going to be great. They all stink. So it's just the Big 12 is just going to beat each other up across the board. And that is where every single one of these games is much more magnified because of the impact.
Right. Yeah, and Utah and Arizona State are both 4-1. They're playing on Friday night.
Yeah, it's a constant round robin of who's going to survive in the end.
Yeah, and that's a debate for a later day. I still think they have a good shot at getting 2 in because if I'm a committee member, you just made the point for me to put 2 teams in going, you have some quality in the Big 12 and they beat themselves up. Let's give it a second. I think that they would struggle figuring out who the second team is because of that.
That's the biggest problem. There won't be a consensus number 2.
But I think that debate would be really good in saying, well, maybe we really need to figure out who that second team is going to be because of all the chaos that's gone through there.